You make a bunch of noise out here, so they have peace and quiet in here. Because there's no better sound than the squeak-free guarantee from Advantech Subflooring and Advantech Subfloor Adhesive.
Welcome to the UnBuild It podcast. This week I'm your host, Pete Yost, and I have my trusty stalwart colleagues, Jake Bruton and Steve Basic.
Good morning.
I'm wide awake now. So we're doing our lovable Q&As. We like doing them, and people love when we answer their questions. And we're just going to dive right in, and we're going to focus on sills, but in two different ways, right?
Yep.
So the first thing is that there's some of our listeners, subscribers that believe...
Just silly. Said this is just silly.
Great.
You've interrupted... Oh, man, I did... Touche, buddy. That
was a good one.
I deserve that right between the eyes.
There you go.
The first one is about some confusion or what viewers think is conflict between Steve and Jake, which is hard to imagine, of course, in terms of sill pan drainage details in window installations.
Or doors.
Or doors.
In fenestration openings.
Fenestration. So doors are not fenestration,
If
right?
they have glass in them, they are.
Ooh, nice. Very nice. And I think the idea is that Jake has been thought to close off the free draining sills.
A face-sealed assembly.
Face-sealed assembly. And Steve has said, no, we should keep that bottom open. So help us out here. Do you guys really disagree about this?
I hate them.
Well, let's
Do you
talk
hate
about...
sills or you hate Jake?
Let's talk about the differences between them first.
Go ahead.
Right?
Knock it out.
So the face sealing a window would be enclosing all four sides of the face of the window at the WRB. So in our
Wait a minute. Face seal means to seal at the face. Doesn't that happen at the cladding, not the WRB?
If you're using your cladding to try to control water, we're using our WRB to control water.
Fair enough.
Seems like Pete is in opposition to Jake's maneuver.
There's disagreement everywhere, for crying out loud.
So if that were
it's a travesty here at the UnBuild It podcast today.
A flanged window installation, that would be taping all four sides of the flange. If that were a flangeless window, that would be liquid sealant or tape acting as our connection point between all four sides.
Acting as the flange.
Yeah, acting as the flange. The idea behind a system like that is that you are creating a perfect barrier. And the word perfect should be the thing that kind of scares you in that instance. Like, if we're relying on this one line of defense, and that line of defense is almost all the way outboard, that tells me that we probably have a higher risk assembly in that instance, potentially. Now, that's not to say that we don't do that from time to time, because the architect on my house specified that, and we went along with it. Hint, the architect for my house is sitting at this table and is part of the podcast.
I didn't design your house.
I'm glad you've narrowed it down.
You mean the other guy.
So we can't disagree that much if it's something that he's drawn and we've done together.
It's unbelievable. I tell people about you too. They don't believe me.
However, I would call my house a special use case.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't stop there either.
I thought he might like that.
You walked right into that.
Oh, man.
So
that's at least 4 podcasts that I can continue that concept with.
We have a thick wall. We have a window that's virtually in the middle of that assembly, in the center third of the wall, meaning every single window has a little shelf over top of it, a little head over top of it, a little roof, if you will. And then even on a house that has, I think I counted the other day because my 11-year-old didn't believe me, I think we have 38 openings in our house, windows and doors combined.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there are 3 or 4 that aren't really well protected. And when I say really well protected, I mean I'm required to seasonally clean the exterior sills off because stuff gets on them and doesn't ever get washed off. Like pollen will stay there for months at a time.
And that's at the bottom of the window, most exposed.
And the place where most window leaks, in my experience, in my time remodeling or repairing new construction, windows tend to leak at the head when the head is exposed to moisture. So we have, as I said, a special use case where the window is very well protected, either by its placement in the wall or its placement in conjunction with overhangs, and they don't generally get wet. And by moving that air and water seal to the outside face of the opening, or the outside face of the unit, we have now doubled the task for that, and we don't have to air seal on the inside, water control on the outside. So we've cut the amount of tape that we have to have. We've cut the number of trips around the building. We've cut labor and materials. And in our instance, it's an okay installation. Now, the problem with the listener's question is, and I'm going to let Steve explain a drained assembly. Mm-hmm. We don't do it that way normally. We do it the way that Steve's going to explain.
Here, here.
So, what's the alternative to face sealing?
Well, so before we go there, I've got a couple questions for you. Think about the best way to ask these. Because,
Fighting words are coming.
I wouldn't say fighting words. Staltworthy. The interesting thing about always and never is they mean without exception, right? So if you say these windows will never leak, you're saying without exception. Mm-hmm. So, question, 38 windows. Did you ever do any water testing on any of those windows?
We did.
Did any of them ever fail?
The answer to this, yes, a bunch of them failed. The first time.
Well, but my point is, never means without exception. And we just proved exception.
Yeah.
So,
fair.
To talk about a drainable system means that, well, these windows not never leak. These windows shouldn't leak. But if they do, then let's have a solution for that, right? It's the difference between prevention and mitigation.
He's going to sell it as if we disagree on this.
I'm not.
It already feels that he's selling it as we do disagree on this.
I'm not. I think we agree. We agree on most building practices. We have an extremely good relationship from a building perspective.
He qualified it.
Well, because you hate the military, you hate cowboys, and I can't be part of that conversation.
You make one poor comment about Top Gun.
You're alone on the range.
Ouch. There you have it. So with that, and I'm serious here, right? And it's this is actually somewhat of a new development since we've been doing the podcast, that I've had, for other reasons, I've been thinking a lot more about control layers, and I came up with my 3 words for each of the 4 different control layers. And for water management, it's protection, it's prevention, or protection, mitigation, and prevention. And a face sealed system is pretty much based on prevention. Like, I'm not going to let water through. So what happens if it does get through? Well, you're screwed, because you basically are relying on a never scenario. So that a 1 in a million scenario is still a failure in the never world, right? So you have to provide some of the mitigation practices to understand that should that fail, what happens? And that's where the mitigation and or protection. Now, in your defense, those 38 windows, most of them, and having seen it and designed the house, most of them, I would say, are extremely well protected. So the amount of water that they see is pretty darn minimal.
Yeah,
and
2-foot overhang or a 5-foot overhang on a bunch of them too.
and some of them are like tucked up under, where if you were tall enough to look out the head of the window, you're going to be looking at the soffit beyond. So in developing window details, and they change quite often, only because I learn things and gain a better understanding. But sometimes we still will do a barrier, like, you know, we have done some houses where, like, I can go around the house and say, okay, there's 52 windows here, but 50 of them are very, very well protected. There's a porch or an overhang, an eave overhang that's 30 inches or something, and it's a single-story ranch. It's like the head is where I'm most concerned, but the damn sill isn't even going to see water on half of these windows. And so, you know, maybe a face-protected system would work, or barrier system would work well there. So it's one of those things of trying to understand what my target is and what is it that I'm trying to solve for? And part of that is understanding the risk involved in that specific scenario. So just like we talked about earlier, Peter, in the project where you kind of tuned your flashing practices to the orientation of a specific project, we can tune projects to, you know, the different levels of water management there. But I think if you don't know the answer to what you want to do, and you do not feel 100% absolutely comfortable in going with a face-sealed barrier system, then you better do a water-managed system where you provide a mitigation path.
One of the things I forgot to say about face-sealed, the geometry of taping generally is substantially easier.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I would give you that face-sealed systems work well from an execution standpoint. Like, they're probably easier to do than any system.
Yeah.
But you have to be exceptionally good at it, because the never assumption is applying.
So when you face seal, which means closing off the bottom of the window at the sill, I totally agree with you that allows you to insulate the sill as well as create an exterior air control plane. Those aren't unimportant, particularly when if you do a drained rough opening so that you can't put insulation in the space between the sill pan and the window unit, and you can't air seal that from the outside. And let's make matters worse from that perspective. I think it's ludicrous that when we put a window in the opening, there is free draining space between the window unit and the rough opening for the jambs in the head, but not the sill. Why? Because the sill of the unit sits on the rough opening. Well, the place that we need the free draining space the most is at the sill, and yet that's the only one of the 4 places that we don't do that. So I'm now recommending that if you're doing a rain screen system for your cladding, the place that's going to see the most potential water is the bottom of the window. Lift that up so you have space between all 4 sides of the window. But when you do that, now your uninsulated, unaired sealed space is even larger. So you better get the damn air seal at the interior, which sometimes can require a change in plane of that from the outside of the building to the inside. That's seriously difficult.
It worked up enough that he said, damn.
He does. You know, as the day goes on with Peter, he gets more feisty.
More and more.
Yeah, he does get, like, tired and crankier. I didn't realize that was possible.
Feisty.
I took him for more of a gold darn it kind of guy.
Gold darn it.
Anyway, I don't think that the good point would be, are there any benefits to face sealing from other perspectives other than keeping water out?
Cost.
Well, and, you know, you can insulate and you can more easily air seal. So it's not as if it's completely negative.
I'll also say that I had a conversation with a window manufacturer, a U.S. manufacturer, in the past few weeks, in which I said, hey, you guys posted this on one of your social medias, and they're face sealing that. I thought that was no longer allowed. And they were like, no, it's fine. And I was like, man, I need to reread their instructions, because I thought they had disallowed that a number of years ago. Like, there are manufacturers that are fine with it.
And just to be clear,
and believe in it.
Well, just to be clear, if you are going to tape it, companies like Sega make a more permeable tape.
Yeah.
So that if you did trap water on the inside,
Zip has a vapor open tape now even too.
So now that they do too. So you have some ability to dry at a higher rate than we had in previous years.
Not to say that that rate is going to be enough,
It might not
but
be
it
enough.
has a
but
greater potential than it did before.
Yes.
Okay.
If the leak is small enough, then the vapor permeable tape.
And
might
I have
be
to
the
remind
solution.
folks that if your weeps you're trying to drain the rough
I
opening
knew he was
distance
going to
between
bring
that.
weeps in. He
You're-
just cannot talk about windows
I'm-
without.
No,
putting
but he's
it
got
in.
a valid point. I know where
Sorry,
he's
if
headed.
you tape close the weeps, you're now no longer draining the rough opening. You're also not draining the window unit.
Half the windows I know don't even have weeps.
There are a substantial amount of manufacturers, though, that the window does have weeps on the bottom. So face sealing is now trapping any of that into the opening, which is a major concern.
Yeah.
So the drained rough opening approach works how? Like, what does it actually look like?
Well, your air sealing now has solely moved to the inside, right? Because you can't really seal the outside for air because you have to leave that sill open. But it's basically flashing, face flashing the jams, and then the head and any water that comes down drips down to a drainable sill pan.
Because if it leaks almost anywhere, it's going to end up at the sill.
Right. Yeah, and that's why you always see the problems there. It's gravity.
Yeah.
And the other thing is understand that when water hits the wall has a certain level of I don't know if absorption is the right word, but it has the certain a level of to take on some water
Capacity.
capacity. Windows don't.
Right.
So
right.
every drop that hits a window
has gotta be
falls to
shed.
gravity and gathers at the bottom of the window.
Yeah.
And so the question is, what happens to all that water? So when you look at some of these houses that have a 6 foot wide by 8 foot, 9, 10 foot picture window, that's 80 square feet of water that hits that window in a rainstorm that now falls to the sill. And you're not talking about a teaspoon of water. You're talking about a coffee can of water.
Yeah, the sheeting there is.
It can potentially be a major problem.
So I think we're ready to head for the other sill.
Sure.
And so the other place
So
where
wait,
there's.
just to be clear, we agree.
Yeah.
We don't disagree.
No.
Yeah.
I
There's
mean,
an
this
instance where both can
this
work.
whole podcast is silliness.
Like the idea of the UnBuild It podcast or this episode?
No,
This
it's-
one.
We
About
talked
silly.
about
feelings
window
were very
sills, and
hurt
now
there
we're going to
for a
move on
moment.
to the other sills. So it's all about silliness.
Silliness.
Boy, oh boy. Sorry, people. I mean, I'd like to think I'm up here with some intellectual, but when I got to explain a joke like silliness.
Yeah, it's
I
the
think
jokes.
he's
It's
talking
our fault,
ill of
not the
us.
joke's fault.
I think he's talking ill of us.
I'm not talking ill.
Syllabus?
I'm working with our audience here.
Okay.
Okay. You guys sit at the corner, you have your own little conversation. We invite Steve in every once in a while to get his opinion. I'm trying to make connections here. We got people out there that have serious problems, serious questions, and I'm here to deliver serious answers.
We're so glad you're here to keep
Thank
us on track.
Gotcha.
Okay, question number 2.
Question number 2 is about detailing the sill where the top of the foundation meets the wood framing, and apparently you guys do it differently.
We do.
What the heck?
So maybe we'll use the word sole plate in this instance,
Sole.
just
Nice.
to denote that it's different than the
Well,
window
I call
sill.
it mud sill. I
Mud
use
sill.
it by its real
you
name,
go.
but mud sill.
Code refers to it as sole plate, SOLE.
Its code
It,
isn't right.
it seriously does
Yeah.
replace sole plate?
I'm going to look that. I'm checking that one.
Okay.
I'll fact check that. I'll get back to you.
If anybody knows where Steve can find a code book, he would like your help with
Do you know why I don't have a code book in my house?
because it's online.
No, I don't look behind me when I design.
You heard it here first.
Thanks to IECC for all you do for us.
Oh, Steve. Oh, you better hope you never come across with the codes.
So
Come back
Yeah.
and play this footage.
the question.
I've been watching too much Colorado football interviews.
Okay. Primetime Steve. So the question is kind of like, You and I wrote an article in 2016 or 17 or 15, somewhere around there, about air sealing. That was kind of a total package approach on the way
Yes.
that we're doing it on some houses. And in that article, we talk about I would now call it nearly famous 2 beads of sealant underneath the sole plate with the Sill sealer down there as well. Sill sealer is not there to manage air. It is a capillary break for moisture purposes only. It's not technically required by code if you're using treated plates, but good luck arguing that with your local code official. And so 1 bead of sealant on the concrete or the stem wall or whatever it is, the foundation, Sill sealer, and then on the opposing half of the plate and on the opposing side of the Sill sealer, another bead of sealant. That mushed down, and then a bead of sealant on the
Sill sealer sandwich.
and the bead of sealant on the face of the sole plate behind the sheathing. Those 3 together have now stopped any air from leaking from outside between the plate, the mud sill, and the concrete, and between any interstitial leakage between the sheathing and the plate.
Fantastic.
We've talked at length about material choices there, acoustical sealants, things like that, and we've had incredible success with that method.
Yes.
Because this is an area that typically does leak a lot of air.
Yeah, in fact, we should note that we did a blower door test on one of our houses this week. It's 1,500 square feet with an average of 9-foot tall ceilings with some offsets in ceiling heights and whatnot, but it averages out to about 9. And we did it before any detailing of the sill, where the envelope's basically finished, and then after detailing of the sill, and we reduced our air leakage by about 15 to 20%. So total envelope air leakage that remained, that number dropped by 15 or 20%, maybe even a little bit more than that if I remember correctly.
It's a significant area. I mean, it's a sub-on-grade house, and it's not perfect, and wood moves a little. The concrete doesn't. There's joints and such there.
So then we went back and detailed it and cut our number by 20%. Yeah. That's a big number. That's a decent amount of air coming through there. And we have done that method almost since 2016. And in 2021, we had a project that was substantially more cost-driven than the majority of our projects. It was a rental property, but the clients are going to own it for potentially generations, and they want to make sure that it's done well and done correctly. So there was a bigger than normal rental or spec home budget, but lesser than what we normally deal with. We were looking for methods in which we could save money, and we decided to try taping from the concrete foundation to the face of our WRB, in this case zip sheathing, and killing all 3 of those beads of sealant. So instead of using things inside the assembly to stop air from moving, we're moving to the outside, same way we tape 2 pieces of zip sheathing together. We're using a piece of, in this case, Siga Fintrum tape, because, in my opinion, it's kind of the only thing that actually sticks to concrete without a primer. And it's vapor open, so if we ever do have a little bit of incidental moisture there, maybe we raise our ability to deal with that moisture.
So your sheathing is proud of the concrete foundation, so the Fentrum is going up on the concrete, coming out the thickness of the OSB, then continuing up the outside face of the zip.
We've done it both ways. We have included sill sealer beneath the sheathing so that it's flush with the face or nearly flush.
Oh.
You know, it's never going to be perfect because the concrete's not perfect. But we've done it both ways, where we flushed our plate or where we flushed our sheathing. I like flushing the sheathing if it's zip R in that case. So we're pushing the sheathing back, and we're having that capillary break between the sheathing with the insulation on the back.
But you're not flushing the zip R sheathing to the foundation. You're flushing the zip R sheathing to an extended lower mud sill.
Different assemblies, but yes, potentially both ways. So.
Okay, just to be clear.
Yeah.
Because they're different in many ways.
They are. So without the second mud sill, yes, we're flushing the zip R close to the face of the concrete. And so we're just making one trip around with the tape. We're not dealing with any time-sensitive or pressure-sensitive sealants. We're not dealing with the mess that's associated with them, and everything in our air barrier in that case for our wall assembly is inspectable or repairable at the surface after the fact. So we weren't there when the framers were there. We don't know if the Vita sealant got underneath there. Do we need to add tape? And this is one that I think you have a different perspective on it, but I think it works just fine. And I'm happy with doing it that way. But my understanding of your perspective, Steve, is why not just go ahead and use the weight of the house to hold all that sealant together?
Well, that's
and
part
do
of it, but
like the minimal investment that is that part of the building. Is that fair?
that's partially fair.
Okay.
I'm going to pose a question to one of the greatest minds I know, Peter, and he's going to act as
I
moderator.
wondered who he was going to pose the question to. Let's see
So,
what we-
Peter, if I tape foundation to the underside of 7/16 zip and up of the face, while I have solved for air leakage, have I in any fashion or way, have I challenged drying capabilities of that assembly?
Pretty sure the Fentrum tape is vapor open or vapor
It is.
permeable. So I would say that given that you're trying to air seal this difficult location with a single product, I'm not quite sure what your concern is with. Are you talking about moisture?
I would like to point out that Peter is one of the smartest building science minds.
Listen, I don't have a problem with him doing it.
just kidding.
Well, one of the problems is I've seen people. You say, okay, we're going to use Sega Fentrum tape, and then I see somebody go and they put zip tape there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a
Right.
difference.
Yeah.
The other thing I've seen is it's probably pretty rare where I look at that tape installation and say that was aesthetically a job well done.
And what's the thickness of the Fentrum tape? Can you get that in different
We
widths?
get
Get it
Yeah.
in different widths.
Yeah.
I think we generally use I think it's 2 3/8 or something
Yeah,
like that.
so that would make me nervous because to do long runs around the whole foundation with only 2 3/8, and you've got to have a vertical leg, a horizontal leg, and another vertical leg, I would definitely be looking
Generally,
for a wider
we don't
tape.
have the horizontal leg when we're doing this.
Oh, so
we,
so you're
we
coming right
generally
up.
are
Well, that's because
flush
you're
or
doing it
close
with
to
the zip
flush.
R sheathing.
Yeah.
But then that's a different question because the lower plate has the ability to dry to the bottom.
Yeah.
So it changes. That's what I
Well,
was
if
saying.
we're doing
It
the
changes.
2 sill plates, what Steve's referring to there is we'll plate without any studs or anything a treated plate that is the width of our wall plate and our studs,
Yeah.
plus the width of the zip R.
Well, you
If
have
we're
to do
doing
it,
that.
You have to do a double mud sill if you're using zip R sheathing and flush, or if you're using zip sheathing and you're flushing it to the face of the mud sill, you have to do a double sill
Why?
because you don't have any adequate shear value if you're butting the bottom of the zip sheathing to the top of the mud sill.
I'm confused. Say it again.
So if I just have a single sill and I bring the zip sheathing down on top of it,
Oh, sorry. Now I understand what you're saying.
I don't
If
have
we
any
have a single
shear.
sill plate, that
that
sheathing
has to
nails
go on the
that.
outside.
Yeah.
It has.
It
to.
does.
So when you do it, and this is what I'm saying. So when you do it if you're doing it on top of the lower mud sill of
So
the double
2
mud
plates.
sill, right? You're nailing it in, so you're taking care of the shear.
Yep.
And yes, I'm perfectly okay with flushing that up and just running the tape vertically down over the face of the lower mud sill, but I don't like bringing it under the mud sill
Yep.
and back to the
So
wall.
now I'm going to throw another wrench into this. If we're doing a double plate like we did at my house and a couple since then, we don't actually do the sill sealer and sealant approach, and we don't do the Fentrum tape approach. We do a piece of zip tape from the face of the zip R down and onto that treated plate.
Yes.
And then a single bead of liquid sealant between the green plate and the concrete at the surface after the fact.
Yes, and that I'm
So we have a third
so
way of
that
doing
I'm
it.
probably okay with. I mean, I've done them where with my detail underneath in the sandwich, if that fails, you can just simply go around the inside of the foundation and seal the mud sill to the top of the foundation wall with a cove bead. right? Quarter round.
Yeah, I even before you introduced the third technique, I thought this really requires
Visual aid.
no, well that too, but you need to come back and do some long-term follow-up. Like when you talk about switching from a tape to then a bead of a sealant, that's an awful lot going on there to get continuity across a bunch of different materials. So I'd want to see how it performs over time.
All of this needs the asterisks of these are generally details that our in-house carpentry team tackles rather than a subcontractor.
Yeah.
The thing I do like about Steve's, kind of a Z flash system with that is it's kind of a belt and suspenders. You're not putting all your eggs in one basket.
In defense of that, we've done a number of slab on grade houses where we've done that. It's rained, and we have a 3-inch pool of water.
Yeah.
Right, like it won't even leak water.
Resisting hydrostatic pressure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know it does work.
Yeah.
And it works well. And again, it's, this is one of those things. It's like, hey, do we put additional screws in the subfloor? Like, there's a lot of ways to skin the cat. But if you're asking me, and unfortunately, as the architect, I can only have one solution to draw.
Right.
So I'm going to draw the one that I think is the best.
Yeah.
And, again, the pricing difference between ours, I mean, you would probably know better, but in the cost of a 3,000, 4,000 square foot house, it probably doesn't even show up on the radar screen.
Yeah, he was talking about a different project that had a tighter budget. Yeah. But I will say that this gets back to a session we did not that long ago about if you're looking for the detail that you can completely hang your hat on for every situation, you're kind of avoiding the responsibility of the building professional to figure it out and make sure that because there's all kinds of conditions that can change. I would say, for instance, if you're on a really tight time schedule and you haven't allowed more of that moisture of materials, construction moisture to come out of the materials, all right, that's going to really change the way the system works because you've got tapes and sealants that are still responding to the moisture content and drying of the materials. So
yeah,
there's quite a lot of variables.
It does. The one thing that we do like about doing it on the outside is the ability to wait and do it after we're dried in too.
Yeah.
So that we don't have the pool.
No, there is something nice about that.
Yeah.
I get it.
But I also can see us doing it multiple different ways. We have a little house that we just finished in June of 2023 that you weren't the architect on, but it had a tuck under garage, and we went right back to the 3 beads of sealant because we were trying to keep the tuck under garage from communicating with the floor system and the rest of the house.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it works. We know it works. I will say that we've used both these methods for quite some time, and since 2016, we haven't had a single house test at over 1.00 ACH 50.
Yeah, which is incredible. So
we got it figured out, and they both work.
I'd like to say at the end of this podcast that we were probably through with the silliness, but I kind of think that before I can close this out.
No, because I got to tell you guys, listen to this story. You guys aren't going to believe
Case
this.
in point.
No, really. My wife and I were on vacation. Went to large metro area. I'm not going to say where because I don't want to indict them. In it, I stop at the stoplight. These guys rushed the car I'm in, opened the doors. They stole everything I had in there. Suitcases, my laptop, everything. Stole it. Right in front of me. My wife said, "What the hell? Where's all the stuff?" And I said, "I think these guys were pirates of the car I be in."
I like that one. I'm going to admit.
If we're going to have a whole episode dedicated to silliness that ends with that joke, you freaking nailed it, buddy.
Car I be in.
The car I be in.
Okay. On that note, you realize now at this point that one of Steve's stories is the way we close out the podcast.
It's like a Pete's resource. It's amazing. He just keeps shoveling them on.
It has the same level of humor as Pete's
Our
resources.
engineer loves it.
Yeah, he's not even paying attention.
Yeah, he's not.
He's in another world.
we're glad you're here. We're glad that you're part of the podcast with us. We enjoy your questions. These were basically questions or listener comments, I should say, maybe. If you would like to reach out, it's questions@unbuilditpodcast.com. Or, Steve, what's your phone number?
It's pretty. You can find it.
It was worth
You
a
can
shot.
find it on the internet. I don't have to give it to you. You can
It was
find it
worth
on
a
the
shot,
internet. There's
just
like
to
ways
see
to
if
get
you-
in contact with me.
That was your
Listen,
perfect opportunity to give out Matt's cell phone number.
No, it's 781-555-1212.
There you go. Till next time, thanks for watching, and check us out on the UnbuildItPodcast.com, or not UnbuildItPodcast.com, sorry. Check us out on
There you
BuildShowNetwork.com.
go.
We are now on the Build Show Network and sharing our content on yet another platform. So, have a good day.
See ya.
So long.